Well, first of all, thank you very much indeed. I've really enjoyed it. I've got a huge amount out of the conversation and listening to you. The first is that what we're discussing here today is how do you create an appropriate civic culture and capacity for a former non-industrial economy, where so many of the institutions and cultures and ways of thinking we've inherited and still work with from the industrial economy, but actually they no longer do the job that they used to do. And so part of it is about thinking about a post-industrial, that's Web 2.0, that's service, that's software. Some of it is anti-industrial, let's try and do away with hierarchy and all the rest of it, but some of it has to be pre-industrial. What are the commons? What are the kind of older ideas of organisation that we might draw upon? But that's the kind of conversation we've been having. In Chicago, Mayor Daley would say, well, the answer to our post-industrial problem is a new schooling system and education of a different kind. In Portland, it was kind of, we want to be open source city in a way. That's their version of that. And Providence, I think, is reaching for its own, and obviously doing so in the context where you're trying to create a functioning civic culture after a period in which civic leadership was compromised. And I opened, I got the Providence, is it the Providence Journal? And there was that kind of, there's that announcement on the front page, and it was like, dun 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 dun. So what are the ingredients of that? Well, one is the prime importance of goals and vision. And that's one of the most important things that leadership can provide. And so a different way of putting it in the I Love Bees context is, what puzzle is Providence a solution to? What puzzle is it you are trying to solve here? And I quite liked when you were talking earlier about the Roger Williams puzzle, the puzzle of tolerance and being a kind of marginal space for dissenting people. But that's one way of thinking about what puzzle is it that was drawing people here to? What collective undertaking are you engaged in Providence? Or are you just living here because it's convenient and the right price and an easy commute to Boston? But that's the challenge. That seems to me is the challenge. Is what more is it that's holding this place together? Another challenge is, who is it for? The world that we're describing of flexible, networked, many pieces loosely joined is great. We were having this discussion if you're a consultant, a software programmer, a web person, a designer, so on and so forth. But if these ideas mean something, they have to work for people with families who have mortgages and kids and commitments and elderly parents. And they have to work for people on low incomes who have no health insurance. So if we're going to be real about this, we have to, I think this, in your challenges thing, you were talking about also it's got to mean something for people who want to make money as well, right? Or it's got to be for people who are developers and so on and so forth. So there's always a danger that we talk to ourselves, and we have to test this against harder challenges of people who don't necessarily share our values or our interests, but might do if we can find a way of connecting with them. The next kind of thing that ran through it is this thing, is this strong or is it weak? Is it a strength that you could have lots of network things, or is it actually masking a fundamental weakness, which was your original point, which is, well, maybe actually, you know, what we need is just a good school system, a good transport system, decent health insurance, and we're kidding ourselves that any of this stuff is really helping, because actually the core is what needs proper funding. Or is that stuff actually weak because it's cumbersome and it's slow and it's clunky and it's, you know, so on and so forth? And I think that comes up time and time again. And how do you make these small things add up to something that's sustainable and strong? And then back to our discussion about how does it infiltrate the system rather than just being on the edges. And so the whole question of scaling, how do you scale? I mean, many different answers to that question, right? And many of the answers probably wrong. We know that just going from small to systemic probably doesn't work. Trying to do it system-wide has huge downsides. But I do like this idea of finding a spark and then putting an oxygen tent on it. Because most cities, you find a spark and you kind of ignore it or maybe even damp it down. But actually, if Providence was a place where you had oxygen tents for bright sparks, and you put an oxygen tent around it so it flames up, that's quite, I like that metaphor. And then finally, this point about, I introduced this language about top and bottom. And then we got this language of the middle as well. And actually, in our entire day in Portland, we never mentioned top and bottom. And it never came out. And in a sense, in Portland, it's kind of like, it's a sort of immersive thing. It sort of comes at you from all over. And so this idea of the washing machine, maybe this is civic leadership. Could be the mayor, but it's all sorts of people. Maybe this is business and the private sector. Maybe this is social innovation, non-profits, so on and so forth. Maybe this is cultural and creative industries. Those are only some of the components, right? And it looks like this is at the top, right? In that. So imagine this now as literally as a washing machine, and you've got your dials up here, and it starts to rotate. And what happens is the stuff that gets to the top in a washing machine always changes. That actually the top in a washing machine is always different, and actually the direction of travel is always different, but it's doing a job. So if you conceive of power as a kind of, what you're trying to get is this washing machine, so the top, in a sense, is always changing, then that gives you a kind of different perspective, I think. Because actually, even the top, the middle, and the bottom is a very kind of, ultimately, a very kind of constraining idea. It might be better than where you just having a top or a disconnected bottom, but I think thinking of things as a washing machine, policy, action, ideas, culture, so on and so forth, round and round. But just to say thank you very, very much indeed from my point of view. And Carol, I'm sure can say something from CEO for City's point of view, but it's been, I hope you've enjoyed it, but I've enjoyed it enormously and got a huge amount out of this conversation. So thank you very much for having us.